The cargo plane bounced through turbulence as it descended toward the remote airstrip in Afghanistan. Captain Sarah Chen gripped the controls with steady hands, her dark eyes scanning the instruments with the precision of someone who had done this 1,000 times before. To her co-pilot and the crew behind her, she was just another cargo pilot, reliable, quiet, and unremarkable. They saw the regulation flight suit, the standard issue headset, and the calm demeanor of someone who moved supplies from point A to point B. What they didn't see were the scars hidden beneath her sleeves, or the way her eyes instinctively swept the horizon, always watching, always calculating. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Sarah had been flying cargo runs for Allied Transport Solutions for 3 years now, and in that time, she'd cultivated a reputation for being dependable but distant. Her colleagues knew almost nothing about her past, only that she'd served in the military before transitioning to civilian aviation. She kept her head down, did her job, and went home to her small apartment where she lived alone with her thoughts and her secrets. The truth was, Captain Sarah Chen had once been Staff Sergeant Chen, one of the most lethal snipers in the United States Marine Corps. For 8 years, she had been the shadow in the mountains, the whisper in the wind, the last thing enemy combatants would never see coming. Her confirmed kill count was classified, but those who knew spoke of it in hushed tones. She had been a weapon forged in the crucible of war, honed to perfection through countless missions behind enemy lines. But that was before Kandahar, before the mission that changed everything, before the day she put down her rifle and walked away from the only life she'd ever known. The transition to civilian life hadn't been easy. The skills that made her exceptional in combat, the hypervigilance, the ability to read micro-expressions, the constant threat assessment, these same skills made it difficult to connect with people in the normal world. Her colleagues saw her as standoffish, not realizing that she was constantly cataloging exits, identifying potential threats, and maintaining situational awareness that most people couldn't comprehend. Flying cargo planes had seemed like the perfect solution. It required precision, discipline, and the ability to work alone for long stretches. The solitude of the cockpit reminded her of the hours she'd spent in sniper hides, patient and focused, waiting for the perfect moment. The main difference was that now, instead of taking lives, she was helping to sustain them by delivering crucial supplies to remote outposts and humanitarian missions. As the plane touched down on the rough airstrip, Sarah felt the familiar tension in her shoulders that came with entering potentially hostile territory. This particular base was known for receiving sporadic attacks from insurgent groups, and the intelligence briefings had mentioned increased activity in the region. But as far as anyone knew, she was just a cargo pilot, someone who flew in, unloaded supplies, and flew out. She wasn't supposed to be anyone's first line of defense. The unloading process began immediately. Forklifts moved in to remove pallets of medical supplies, ammunition, and food rations. Sarah performed her post-flight checks while keeping one eye on the perimeter. Old habits died hard, and despite her best efforts to leave her past behind, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was off about this particular delivery. Master Sergeant Rodriguez, the base's logistics coordinator, approached her with a clipboard and a tired smile. "Another smooth delivery, Captain Chen. You make this look easy." Sarah nodded politely, accepting the paperwork. "Just doing my job, Sergeant." "You've got about an hour before you're cleared for takeoff," Rodriguez continued. "Feel free to grab some chow at the mess hall. The cook actually knows what he's doing, unlike some bases I've been to." Sarah thanked him and made her way toward the temporary buildings that served as the base's facilities. The mess hall was a prefabricated structure that had seen better days, but it was clean and functional. She grabbed a cup of coffee and found a corner table where she could observe the room, while staying out of the general conversation. The base personnel were a mix of military and civilian contractors, all working together to maintain this remote outpost in a region that remained dangerous. Despite years of conflict, Sarah listened to their conversations with half an ear, picking up on the usual complaints about supply delays, communication issues, and the monotony of daily routine. But then she heard something that made her blood run cold. Intel says there's been unusual movement in the hills about 2 clicks north, one of the soldiers was saying to his companion. Could be nothing, but they're increasing patrols just to be safe. Sarah's trained ear caught the subtle tension in the man's voice. She'd heard that same tone countless times before, the sound of someone trying to appear calm while discussing a very real threat. Her eyes moved to the windows, automatically calculating sight lines and potential approaches to the base. The rational part of her mind reminded her that this wasn't her problem. She was a cargo pilot now, not a Marine sniper. Her job was to fly supplies, not to engage in combat operations. But the warrior inside her, the part that had been honed through years of training in combat, was already assessing the tactical situation. Sarah finished her coffee and walked outside, ostensibly to check on the refueling process. In reality, she was conducting a reconnaissance of the base's defensive positions. The perimeter was protected by concrete barriers and razor wire, with guard towers at regular intervals. The soldiers manning these positions looked competent, but relaxed perhaps. Too relaxed for a base that had received intelligence about potential threats. She made her way back to her aircraft, where the refueling crew was nearly finished with their work. The plane would be ready to depart in about 30 minutes, which meant she would be safely airborne before any potential attack could materialize. The logical thing to do would be to complete her pre-flight checklist, get clearance from the tower, and head home to her quiet apartment. But as she climbed into the cockpit, Sarah's eyes were drawn to the hills beyond the base perimeter. The terrain was exactly the kind of ground she would have chosen for a sniper position, elevated, with good sight lines and multiple escape routes. If someone wanted to cause maximum damage to the base, that's where they would position themselves. Her hands moved over the controls with practiced efficiency, but her mind was elsewhere. She was remembering the weight of her M40A5 sniper rifle, the feel of the stock against her shoulder, the way her breathing would slow and deepen as she settled into position. She was remembering the satisfaction of a perfectly placed shot, the knowledge that her skill and precision could mean the difference between life and death for the people she was sworn to protect. The radio crackled to life, interrupting her thoughts. Allied Transport 27, this is base operations. You're cleared for departure in 15 minutes. Weather looks good for your route home. Copy that, base operations. Allied Transport 27 will be ready. Sarah began her pre-flight routine, checking instruments and systems with the same methodical approach she'd once used to prepare her rifle for a mission. Everything was in order, the weather was clear, and there was no reason to delay her departure. But the feeling of unease continued to grow stronger. She thought about the young soldiers she'd seen in the mess hall, barely out of high school, trying to look tough while discussing potential threats. She thought about Master Sergeant Rodriguez, who had been nothing but professional and courteous. She thought about the medical supplies she'd just delivered, supplies that would save lives if they remained in the right hands. The radio crackled again, but this time the voice was different, more urgent. All units, this is Overwatch. We have movement confirmed in the northern hills. Multiple targets, approximately 2,000 meters out. All personnel to heightened alert status. Sarah's blood ran cold. 2,000 meters was well within the range of a competent sniper, and if the intelligence was correct about increased insurgent activity, this base was about to come under attack. She looked through the cockpit window at the soldiers scrambling to their positions, their earlier relaxation replaced by the focused intensity of men preparing for battle. The rational part of her mind screamed that this wasn't her fight. She was a civilian contractor now, not a Marine. Her responsibility was to her aircraft, her cargo, and her own safety. The smart play was to get clearance for immediate departure and put as much distance as possible between herself and whatever was about to happen. But then she saw something that changed everything. Through her cockpit window, she could see the base's main watchtower, where a young soldier was scanning the northern hills with binoculars. He was exposed, silhouetted against the sky, and completely unaware that he was presenting a perfect target to anyone with a rifle and the skill to use it. Sarah's experienced eye caught the telltale glint of sunlight reflecting off metal in the distant hills, the unmistakable signature of a rifle scope. In that instant, she knew with absolute certainty that the young soldier in the watchtower had less than 30 seconds to live. Time seemed to slow as her training took over. Her hand moved to the equipment bag she kept behind her seat, a bag that her colleagues assumed contained standard pilot gear. Inside, wrapped in a protective cloth, was something that no cargo pilot should have had any reason to carry: a custom-built precision rifle that she'd been unable to part with when she left the Marines. The weapon was a thing of beauty, a Remington 700 that had been modified to her exact specifications. The stock was perfectly fitted to her shoulder, the trigger had been adjusted to her preferred pull weight, and the scope had been zeroed to her precise requirements. She had told herself that she kept it for sentimental reasons, a reminder of who she used to be. But deep down, she had always known that someday she might need it again. Sarah's hands moved with practiced efficiency, assembling the rifle with the kind of speed that came from years of muscle memory. She chambered around, adjusted the scope for distance and wind, and settled into position. The cockpit window would have to serve as her shooting position, not ideal, but workable. Through the scope, she could see the insurgent sniper clearly now. He was approximately 1,800 meters away, positioned behind a rock formation that provided excellent cover and concealment. He was good, very good. His position was nearly perfect, and he had clearly done his reconnaissance. But he had made one crucial mistake. He had assumed that there was no one on the base capable of engaging him at that distance. The young soldier in the watchtower was still scanning the hills with his binoculars, completely unaware that death was looking back at him through a high-powered scope. Sarah could see the insurgent's finger moving toward the trigger, could visualize the precise moment when he would fire. Sarah's breathing slowed to the rhythm she had learned so many years ago. Inhale, exhale, hold, in the space between heartbeats. In the moment of perfect stillness, she became once again the weapon she had been trained to be. The cargo plane, the base, the entire world outside her scope narrowed to a single point of focus. The wind was minimal, maybe 3 to 4 miles per hour from the west. At this distance, she would need to compensate for bullet drop and the slight crosswind. Her fingers made minute adjustments to the scope, calculations that had become as natural as breathing. 1,800 meters, uphill angle. Temperature approximately 85 degrees Fahrenheit. All variables processed and accounted for in a matter of seconds. Through the scope, she could see the insurgent sniper settling into his final firing position. His rifle was trained on the watchtower, on the young soldier who was still scanning the horizon with his binoculars. Sarah estimated she had maybe 10 seconds before he would fire. The irony wasn't lost on her. For 3 years, she had flown cargo runs to bases just like this one, maintaining the fiction that she was just a pilot. She had deliberately distanced herself from the military personnel she encountered, not wanting to be drawn back into the world she had left behind. But now, in this moment of crisis, she was the only thing standing between that young soldier and death. Her finger found the trigger, and years of training took over. The rifle became an extension of her body, the scope an extension of her eyes. She could feel her heartbeat, slow and steady, could time her breathing to the rhythm of her pulse. In the Marines, they had called her Ghost, because of her ability to appear and disappear without a trace, to eliminate targets that others couldn't even see. The insurgent sniper was good, but he wasn't a Marine. He had good position, good concealment, and clearly possessed significant skill. But he lacked the hundreds of hours of training that Sarah had endured, the countless missions that had honed her abilities to a razor's edge. Most importantly, he didn't know she was there. Sarah's crosshairs settled on the target. At this distance, she was aiming for center mass, the largest target area that would ensure a clean kill. The headshot would be more dramatic, but center mass was more reliable, especially with the variables of wind and distance. Her finger began the slow, steady pressure on the trigger that would send a .308 caliber round across nearly a mile of distance. The sound of the shot was muffled by the confined space of the cockpit, but Sarah felt the familiar recoil, the slight jump of the rifle against her shoulder. Through the scope, she tracked the bullet's path, watching for the telltale impact that would tell her whether her shot had found its mark. The insurgent sniper jerked backward and then went still. Sarah had seen that same reaction countless times before the sudden decisive end that came with a precision shot. The threat to the young soldier in the watchtower had been eliminated, but Sarah knew that this was likely just the beginning. Her radio crackled to life. All units, shots fired from the northern hills. Sniper neutralized. Repeat. Enemy sniper neutralized. Unknown shooter. Unknown location. Sarah was already breaking down her rifle, returning it to its concealed position in her equipment bag. As far as anyone knew, she was just a cargo pilot who had been preparing for departure when the shooting started. The shot had come from inside her aircraft, but the sound would have been difficult to pinpoint, and the muzzle flash would have been largely concealed by the cockpit structure. But her warrior instincts were telling her that this wasn't over. Professional snipers rarely worked alone, especially in a coordinated attack on a fortified position. If there was one shooter, there were likely others, and they would be adjusting their tactics now that they knew the base had some kind of sniper capability. She grabbed her radio handset and switched to the base's tactical frequency. Base operations, this is Allied Transport 27. I'm observing the northern hills from my position and may be able to provide additional overwatch if needed. There was a pause before the response came. Allied Transport 27, this is Base Operations. Are you saying you have visual on the threat area? Affirmative. I have a clear view of the northern approach and can maintain overwatch while you coordinate your response. What Sarah didn't say was that she was already scanning the hills for additional targets. Her trained eye was picking up subtle signs of movement, the kind of disturbances that most people would miss, but that screamed enemy position to someone with her experience. She counted at least 3 additional positions where snipers could be concealed, and her instincts told her that at least one of them was occupied. The base's defensive response was beginning to take shape. She could see soldiers moving to reinforced positions, machine gun teams setting up fields of fire, and the base commander coordinating the response from his command bunker. But they were still vulnerable to long-range sniper fire, and the enemy had the advantage of knowing the base's layout and defensive positions. Sarah's radio crackled again. All units, this is Overwatch. We have confirmed movement in at least 2 additional positions. Estimate 3 to 4 enemy snipers total. Maintain cover and avoid unnecessary exposure. Through her scope, Sarah had already identified the next target. This one was approximately 2,100 meters away, positioned in a cluster of rocks that provided excellent concealment. Like the first shooter, he was skilled and patient, waiting for the perfect shot. But he had made the same mistake as his dead colleague. He had assumed that there was no one on the base capable of engaging him at that distance. Sarah settled into position again, her breathing slowing to the familiar rhythm. The second shot would be more difficult, longer range, different angle, and now the enemy would be aware that someone was shooting back. But difficulty had never been a deterrent for a Marine sniper. The hunt was on, and Sarah knew that the most dangerous part was yet to come. The remaining snipers would now be aware that they were being hunted by someone with professional skills, and they would adapt their tactics accordingly. What Sarah had anticipated proved correct. The second sniper was more cautious than his predecessor, clearly having learned from his dead colleague's mistake. Through her scope, Sarah could see him shifting positions every few minutes, never staying in one place long enough to present a clear target. He was smart, experienced, and clearly aware that someone with serious skills was hunting him. But patience had always been one of Sarah's greatest strengths, and she had learned long ago that in the deadly game of sniper versus sniper, the first person to get impatient was usually the first person to die. She maintained her position in the cockpit, using the aircraft structure to break up her silhouette, while keeping her rifle trained on the area where she had last seen movement. The base's defensive response was intensifying around her. She could hear the distinctive sound of a .50 caliber machine gun being set up on the roof of the command bunker, and radio chatter indicated that a quick reaction force was being prepared to sweep the northern hills. But sweeping the hills would mean exposing soldiers to sniper fire, and Sarah knew that at least 2 more shooters were still out there. The smart play was to neutralize the long-range threats first, then move in with infantry support. Unfortunately, she seemed to be the only person on the base with the capability to engage targets at that distance. Her radio crackled. Unknown shooter, this is base operations. If you can hear this frequency, we need you to maintain your position and continue providing overwatch. We're tracking at least 2 more targets in the northern hills. Sarah keyed her mic. Base operations, this is Allied Transport 27. I'm maintaining overwatch from my current position. I have visual on suspected sniper positions and can provide fire support as needed. The response came immediately. Allied Transport 27, are you saying you have the capability to engage targets at long range? Sarah hesitated for a moment. Once she answered that question, there would be no going back to her quiet life as a cargo pilot. The secret she had kept for 3 years would be exposed, and everyone would know that she was much more than she appeared to be. But looking at the young soldiers taking cover behind barriers, she realized that her secret was less important than their lives. Affirmative, base operations. I have the capability and the equipment to engage long-range targets. There was a long pause before the response came. Allied Transport 27, this is Colonel Martinez, base commander. Are you telling me that you're trained for precision shooting? Yes, sir. Marine Corps sniper, 8 years active duty. Jesus Christ, came the whispered response. Okay, Marine, I don't know what the hell you're doing flying cargo planes, but right now you're the best asset we have. Can you take out the remaining shooters? Sarah was already tracking movement in the rocks where she had last seen the second sniper. I'm working on it, Colonel, but I'm going to need your people to stay in cover and avoid unnecessary movement. These guys are good, and they're looking for targets of opportunity. Copy that. All units, maintain cover and minimal movement. We have a friendly sniper providing overwatch. The second shooter made his mistake 30 seconds later. A slight shift in position, probably trying to get a better angle on the command bunker, exposed his shoulder for just a moment. At 2,100 meters, it was a challenging shot, but Sarah had made more difficult ones under worse conditions. Her finger found the trigger, and the rifle spoke again. The .308 round crossed the distance in just under 3 seconds, and Sarah watched through her scope as the insurgent sniper jerked and went still. 2 down, at least 2 more to go, but the remaining shooters were learning from their dead colleagues' mistakes. Sarah could see subtle signs of movement in the hills, but they were being much more careful now, using the terrain to their advantage and avoiding exposing themselves to long-range fire. This was turning into a chess match, with each side trying to anticipate the other's moves. The radio crackled again. All units, this is Overwatch. We have confirmed kills on 2 enemy snipers. Unknown shooter, outstanding work. We're tracking. Movement in grid squares 4 to 7 and 4 to 9. Can you engage? Sarah was already scanning those areas, looking for any sign of the remaining threats. The insurgents were good, better than she had initially given them credit for. They were using the combination of natural cover and tactical patience that suggested professional training. But they had made one crucial error. They had continued the fight even after losing half their team. A smart enemy would have withdrawn after the first kill, but these men seemed determined to complete their mission regardless of the cost. Base operations, this is Allied Transport 27. I'm tracking possible movement in both grid squares, but I need these guys to give me a shot. Can you create a distraction? What kind of distraction? Sarah thought for a moment. Have one of your machine gun teams put some suppressive fire on the rocks in grid square 4 to 7. Not enough to actually hit anything. Just enough to make them think you're trying to pin them down. If they think you're focused on that position, they might try to relocate. Copy that. Stand by. 30 seconds later, the distinctive sound of a .50 caliber machine gun echoed across the valley as the base's gunners opened up on the suspected sniper position. The heavy rounds smashed into the rocks, sending up clouds of dust and debris. It was exactly the kind of suppressive fire that would make a hidden sniper want to find a new position. Sarah kept her scope trained on the area between the 2 suspected positions, watching for any movement that might indicate someone trying to relocate. The machine gun fire continued for about 30 seconds, then stopped. In the silence that followed, she caught a glimpse of movement. Someone in camouflage fatigues moving between rock formations. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The third sniper was approximately 1,950 meters away, moving in a low crouch between 2 large boulder formations. Sarah tracked his movement, leading the target and calculating his probable destination. He was heading for a position that would give him a clear shot at the base's main gate, where supply trucks and personnel carriers would be vulnerable. Sarah's breathing slowed as she prepared for the shot. This target was moving, which made the calculation more complex. She had to account for his speed, direction, and the precise moment when he would be in the open, long enough for her bullet to reach him. It was the kind of shot that separated professional snipers from skilled marksmen. Her finger began the slow, steady pressure on the trigger, and the rifle bucked against her shoulder. Through the scope, she watched the insurgent stumble and fall, his weapon clattering across the rocks. 3 down. The echo of the third shot was still reverberating across the valley when Sarah felt the shift in the tactical situation. The silence that followed was different from the others, heavy with a new kind of tension. Sarah could sense a change in the atmosphere, a shift that told her the remaining sniper was reassessing his options. 3 of his teammates were dead, killed by someone he couldn't see. Someone who was clearly operating at a professional level that matched or exceeded his own capabilities. Through her scope, Sarah continued to scan the northern hills, looking for any sign of the final shooter. The terrain was working against her now. The remaining sniper had had time to observe her previous shots, to calculate the general direction they had come from, and to find a position that would give him maximum cover while still allowing him to engage targets on the base. Her radio crackled. Allied Transport 27, this is base operations. Confirm 3 targets neutralized. Confirmed. 3 down, 1 still out there. This last one is smart. He's gone to ground and he's not giving me a shot. Colonel Martinez came on the radio. Marine, what's your assessment of the remaining threat? Sarah considered the question carefully. Sir, this last shooter is the most skilled of the group. He's had time to observe my previous shots and adjust his tactics accordingly. He's also the most patient, He's not going to expose himself. Unless he has a high-value target. What do you consider a high-value target? Command personnel, the base commander, anyone who looks like they might be important to the operation. He's probably looking for you, sir, or your senior staff. There was a pause. Understood. All command personnel will remain in hardened positions until this threat is neutralized. Can you take him out? Sarah was already working on the problem. The remaining sniper had to be in one of three positions, rocky outcroppings that would give him the combination of cover and observation that he needed. But all three positions were well concealed, and he had probably prepared multiple firing positions within each area. I'm working on it, sir, but I might need to draw him out. He's not going to expose himself unless he thinks he has a shot worth taking. What do you need? Sarah thought for a moment. I need someone to present a tempting target. Someone in command-level uniform, moving between positions in a way that looks natural but gives him a clear shot opportunity. You want to use one of my officers as bait? No, sir. I want to use myself. The radio was quiet for a long moment. Explain. I'll move from my current position to what looks like a command post, wearing a borrowed uniform that makes me look like a high-value target. When he takes the shot, I'll be ready for him. The muzzle flash will give away his position, and I'll have a clear shot in return. That's a hell of a risk, Marine. It's a calculated risk, sir. And right now, it's the best option we have. Colonel Martinez was quiet for another moment. What do you need? I need someone to bring me a set of officer's insignia and a command-level uniform jacket. Something that will make me look like a tempting target from a distance. And I need your people to create the illusion that I'm moving to coordinate the base's response. Copy that. Stand by. While she waited, Sarah continued to scan the hills, looking for any sign of movement or position that might give away the final sniper's location. He was good, very good. She hadn't seen even a hint of his position, which suggested that he was either extremely well concealed or that he had moved to a location she hadn't considered. 10 minutes later, Master Sergeant Rodriguez approached her aircraft carrying a bundle of clothing. Ma'am, Colonel Martinez sent these. He also wanted me to tell you that this is completely voluntary, and if you want to reconsider, no one will think less of you. Sarah accepted the uniform jacket and insignia. Tell the Colonel I appreciate the concern, but this is what I do. Or what I used to do anyway. As she put on the borrowed uniform, Rodriguez looked at her with new respect. Ma'am, if you don't mind me asking, what's a Marine sniper doing flying cargo planes? Sarah paused in the process of pinning on the Colonel's insignia. That's a long story, Sergeant. Maybe I'll tell you about it sometime when people aren't trying to kill us. She checked her rifle one more time, ensuring that everything was ready for what was essentially a sniper duel. The plan was simple but dangerous. She would expose herself as a high-value target, draw the enemy sniper's fire, and use his muzzle flash to locate and eliminate him. It was the kind of tactic that required split-second timing and absolute confidence in her abilities. The radio crackled. Allied Transport 27, this is base operations. All units are in position. When you're ready to begin your movement, let us know. Sarah took a deep breath, feeling the familiar calm that came before a dangerous mission. This was what she had been trained for, what she had spent 8 years of her life perfecting. The cargo plane, the civilian clothes, the quiet life, all of that fell away, leaving only the Marine sniper she had always been. Base operations, this is Allied Transport 27. Beginning movement in 30 seconds. She climbed down from the cockpit, her rifle concealed but ready. The borrowed uniform fit reasonably well, and from a distance, she would look like exactly the kind of target that an enemy sniper would want to eliminate. The key was to move naturally, to present herself as a legitimate command target while being ready to respond instantly when the shot came. Sarah began walking toward the command bunker, her pace unhurried but purposeful. To anyone watching from the hills, she would appear to be a senior officer moving to coordinate the base's response to the sniper threat. But every step was calculated, every movement designed to draw fire while positioning herself for the countershot. That would end this deadly game. In the hills, she knew. A skilled sniper was watching her through his scope, calculating range and windage, preparing to take the shot that would eliminate what appeared to be a high-value target. What he didn't know was that he was about to engage in a sniper duel with someone who had been trained to win exactly this kind of fight. The adrenaline from the sniper duel was beginning to fade as Sarah remained in position, but her mind was still operating at the heightened state that combat demanded. She had covered about 50 meters when she felt it, the unmistakable sensation of being watched through a rifle scope. It was something every sniper learned to recognize, an almost supernatural awareness that came from years of being both the hunter and the hunted. The enemy sniper had found her, and he was preparing to take his shot. She continued walking, maintaining the same pace and posture while her mind raced through the calculations. Based on the angle of observation she was feeling, the shot would most likely come from the northernmost rocky outcropping, probably from an elevation of about 150 feet above the valley floor. The distance would be approximately 1,800 meters, a challenging shot, but well within the capabilities of a skilled marksman. The key was timing. She needed to give him enough time to settle into position and prepare his shot, but not so much time that he might notice something was wrong. Professional snipers developed an intuition about their targets, and if she acted too obviously like bait, he might become suspicious. Sarah reached the midpoint of her walk, the spot where she would be most exposed to fire from the northern hills. She paused, as if checking something on her radio, and used the moment to scan the area where she expected the shot to come from. Still nothing visible, but the feeling of being watched was stronger now. Her radio crackled softly. Allied Transport 27, this is Overwatch. We have possible movement in the northern rocks. Continue your movement but be ready. Sarah keyed her mic briefly. Copy. She resumed walking, but now she was counting steps, calculating the exact moment when she would need to move. The enemy sniper would want to take his shot when she was in the open, with no cover immediately available. Based on her current position and the terrain ahead, that moment would come in about 20 more steps, 15 steps. She could feel the crosshairs tracking her movement, could visualize the enemy sniper's finger beginning to take up slack on the trigger. Her own rifle was ready, concealed but positioned for immediate use. 10 steps. The sensation of being watched was now so intense it was almost physical. Every instinct she had was screaming that the shot was coming, that she was about to be engaged by a skilled enemy marksman who thought he had found the perfect target. 5 steps. Sarah's breathing slowed and her muscles tensed for the movement. That would either save her life or end it. Everything depended on her ability to locate the muzzle flash and return accurate fire before the enemy sniper could chamber another round. The shot came just as she reached the predetermined point. The crack of the rifle echoed across the valley, and Sarah felt the bullet pass close enough to her head that she could feel the displacement of air. But she was already moving, dropping to one knee and bringing her own rifle to bear on the rocky outcropping where she had seen the brief flicker of muzzle flash. There, approximately 1,850 meters away, partially concealed behind a boulder. Formation. The enemy sniper was good, but he had made the critical error of taking the shot from a position that didn't offer immediate concealment from return fire. Sarah could see just enough of his silhouette to engage. Her rifle was all ready. At her shoulder, the scope settled on the target. The enemy sniper was beginning to move, probably trying to relocate to his secondary position, but Sarah's finger was already applying pressure to the trigger. The shot broke clean, and through her scope, she watched the insurgent jerk backward. and disappear behind the rocks. The silence that followed was absolute. Sarah remained in position for another 30 seconds, scanning the area for any sign of movement or additional threats. But the hills were still, and the oppressive feeling of being watched had vanished completely. Her radio crackled. "Allied Transport 27, this is base operations. Confirmed target neutralized? Confirmed. 4 targets down, no additional movement observed." Colonel Martinez came on the radio. "Outstanding work, Marine. All units, maintain defensive positions. For another 10 minutes, then we'll send a patrol to confirm and secure the area." Sarah slowly stood up, her rifle still ready, but the immediate crisis over. Around her, the base was beginning to return to normal operations, but she could feel the eyes of every soldier and civilian contractor watching her. The secret she had kept for 3 years was well and truly out now. Master Sergeant Rodriguez approached her, his expression a mixture of awe and respect. "Ma'am, I've been in the Army for 15 years, and I've never seen shooting like that. 4 targets, all at extreme range, all clean kills. That was ... that was something else." Sarah began breaking down her rifle, her movements automatic after years of practice. "It's what I was trained for, Sergeant. Just hadn't had to use those skills in a while." "A while?" Rodriguez shook his head. "Ma'am, with respect, you don't just lose skills like that. You've been keeping yourself sharp." Sarah paused in her disassembly of the weapon. He was right, of course. Despite her best efforts to leave her past behind, she had continued to practice, continued to maintain the skills that had kept her alive through 8 years of combat. She told herself it was just habit, just muscle memory. But the truth was that she had never really stopped being a Marine sniper. "Old habits," she said simply, returning the rifle to its concealed position in her equipment bag. The patrol that went out to confirm the kills returned an hour later with a full report. 4 insurgent snipers, all confirmed dead, all killed by single shots at ranges between 1,800 and 2,100 meters. The weapons they had been carrying were high-end precision rifles, and their equipment suggested professional training and significant resources. Colonel Martinez found Sarah in the mess hall, where she was drinking coffee and trying to process what had just happened. He sat down across from her, his expression serious but not unfriendly. "So," he said, "Sarah Chen, cargo pilot. Except you're not really just a cargo pilot, are you?" Sarah met his gaze steadily. "I am now, Colonel. What happened today was ... an exception. An exception that saved a lot of lives. My intelligence officer tells me that those snipers were positioned to cause maximum casualties. If they had been able to complete their mission, we probably would have lost a dozen people, maybe more." Sarah nodded but didn't respond. She had seen the tactical setup, had understood immediately what the enemy snipers had been planning. It would have been a coordinated attack designed to create chaos and casualties, the kind of operation that could cripple a small base like this one. "I looked up your service record," Colonel Martinez continued. "Staff Sergeant Sarah Chen, 3rd Battalion, 5th Marines. 8 years active duty, 2 tours in Iraq, 3 in Afghanistan. Confirmed kills classified, but estimated at over 100. Recipient of the Silver Star, Bronze Star with V device, and 2 Purple Hearts. One of the most effective snipers in Marine Corps' history." "That was a long time ago," Sarah said quietly. 3 years. That's not a long time in military terms. And based on what I saw today, you haven't lost a step." Sarah looked out the window at the hills where she had just taken 4 lives. "I left that life behind for a reason, Colonel. I'm not looking to go back to it. Can I ask why? What makes someone with your skills and your service record walk away from the Corps?" Sarah was quiet for a long moment. "Kandahar, there was a MISSIL and things went wrong. People died who shouldn't have died. I decided I didn't want to be a killer anymore." Colonel Martinez nodded slowly. I've seen your after-action reports from that mission. You made the right call under impossible circumstances. The fact that you're still carrying that weight around shows exactly the kind of person you are, does it? Because today I killed 4 people, and I didn't hesitate. I didn't feel bad about it. I felt satisfied, like I was doing what I was meant to do. You were doing what you were meant to do. You were protecting people who couldn't protect themselves. That's what Marines do, Sarah. That's what you do. Sarah finished her coffee and stood up. I need to get back to my aircraft. I have a schedule to keep, Sarah. Colonel Martinez stood as well. I want you to know that what you did today won't be forgotten. You saved lives, and you did it without hesitation or expectation of reward. That's the definition of heroism. Sarah walked back to her aircraft, aware that every person she passed was watching her with new eyes. The quiet cargo pilot was gone, replaced by someone they now knew was capable of extraordinary things. She completed her pre-flight checks and prepared for departure, but her mind was elsewhere. For 3 years, she had tried to convince herself that she could leave her past behind, that she could be just another civilian contractor living a quiet life. But today had shown her the truth. She would always be a Marine sniper, regardless of what uniform she wore or what job she did. The skills, the instincts, the willingness to take a life to save others, these were not things she could simply abandon. As her aircraft lifted off from the base, Sarah looked down at the hills where she had just fought her most challenging sniper duel. 4 men were dead because of her actions, but dozens of others were alive. The mathematics of war were harsh but simple. Sometimes killing was necessary to prevent greater killing. But as she flew home to her quiet apartment, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that her life had just changed forever. The secret was out, and there would be consequences. The question was whether she was ready to face them. The flight home from the base gave Sarah time to process what had just happened, but her mind kept returning to the moment she had picked up her rifle. For 3 years, she had convinced herself that part of her life was over, that she could exist quietly as a cargo pilot without ever having to face the warrior she had once been. Now, as she flew through the evening sky, she realized how naive that belief had been. Sarah's apartment felt different when she returned home that evening. The small, sparse space that had once been her sanctuary now felt like a prison. She stood in her living room, still wearing her flight suit, and realized that she could no longer hide from who she really was. The events at the base had shattered the carefully constructed fiction of her civilian life. She walked to her bedroom closet and pulled out a wooden box from the back shelf. Inside, wrapped in cloth, were the medals that Colonel Martinez had mentioned. The Silver Star, awarded for gallantry in action. The Bronze Star with V device, for heroic achievement in combat. 2 Purple Hearts, earned with her own blood. She had hidden them away 3 years ago, telling herself that they belonged to someone she used to be. But as she held the Silver Star, she remembered the mission that had earned it. A squad of Marines had been pinned down by enemy fire, and she had spent 6 hours eliminating the machine gun positions that were keeping them trapped. 12 confirmed kills, all at ranges exceeding 1,000 meters. When the rescue helicopters finally arrived, she had been credited with saving the lives of 8 Marines. Her phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. The caller ID showed a number she didn't recognize, but the area code was from Washington, D.C. Sarah Chen, she answered. Ms. Chen, this is Colonel William Harris, Marine Corps Recruiting Command. I believe you know why I'm calling. Sarah sat down heavily on her couch. Word travels fast. When one of our former snipers takes out 4 enemy combatants at extreme range, it tends to get attention. I've been asked to reach out to you regarding a potential return to active duty. I'm not interested, Colonel. I understand your reservations, but I'd like you to hear me out. The Marine Corps has changed since you left. We've developed new training programs, new support systems for our snipers. The mission in Kandahar that led to your discharge, we've studied it, learned from it. We want to do better. Sarah closed her eyes. Colonel, I appreciate what you're trying to do, but I'm not the same person I was 3 years ago. I've moved. On? Have you? Because from what I heard, you moved like someone who never really left. 4 kills, all clean, all at extreme range, all while protecting friendlies. That's not the action of someone who's moved on. That's the action of a Marine who remembers her oath. The oath. Sarah could still recite it from memory. I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. It was more than words. It was a commitment that had defined her entire adult life. What exactly are you offering? She asked. A chance to come back as a staff sergeant, with the possibility of advancing to gunnery sergeant within a year. You'd be assigned to the Marine Corps' Scout Sniper School as an instructor, helping to train the next generation of snipers. No more frontline combat unless you specifically volunteer for it. Sarah was quiet for a long moment. Teaching had always appealed to her, the idea of passing on her skills to young Marines who were just beginning their careers. But the thought of returning to the military, of putting the uniform back on, filled her with conflicting emotions. I need time to think about it, she said finally. Of course. But Sarah, I want you to know that the Corps never forgot about you. You're still one of the best snipers we've ever trained, and today proved that you haven't lost a step. We need people like you. After hanging up, Sarah sat in her apartment as darkness fell outside. The phone call had forced her to confront a truth she had been avoiding. She had never really left the Marine Corps. She had simply changed uniforms and tried to convince herself that she was someone else. Her laptop chimed with an email. Notification. The sender was David Kim, her former spotter, and one of the few people who knew the full story of what had happened in Kandahar. The subject line read, "Saw the news. You okay?" Sarah opened the email. David had left the Marines 6 months after. She did, unable to cope with the guilt of surviving when so many others hadn't. He now worked as a police officer in San Diego, and they had maintained a sporadic correspondence over the years. Sarah, the email read, I saw the reports about what happened at the base today. 4 confirmed kills at long range. That's some serious work. I know you've been trying to put all of this behind you, but maybe it's time to accept that this is who you are. You're a protector, a guardian. You always have been. The Marines need people like you, but more importantly, the world needs people like you. Don't let Kandahar define you forever. What happened today shows that you're still one of the good guys. Call me if you want to talk. David. Sarah stared at the email for a long time. David had been with her that day in Kandahar, had seen everything that happened. If anyone understood her struggle, it was him. But he was also right about something else. She had let one bad day define 3 years of her life. She walked to her window and looked out at the city lights below. Somewhere out there, people were going about their normal lives, unaware that there were others who stood ready to protect them. For 8 years, she had been one of those protectors. Today, for a brief moment, she had been again. Her phone rang. Again. This time it was a number she recognized. Colonel Martinez from the base. Sarah, I hope you don't mind me calling you directly. I got your number from our flight operations. It's fine, Colonel. What can I do for you? I wanted to thank you again for what you did today. My intelligence officer finished his assessment of the enemy positions, and his conclusion is that you prevented what could have been a devastating attack. Those snipers were positioned to cause maximum casualties during our evening formation. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. The evening formation, when the entire base personnel would have been gathered in the open for the daily briefing. It would have been a massacre. I'm glad I could help, she said simply. Sarah, I also wanted to let you know that I've submitted a recommendation for you to receive the Civilian Service Award. It's not much compared to what you've earned in the past, but it's the least we can do. That's not necessary, Colonel. Yes, it is. What you did today went far beyond any reasonable expectation. You risked your life to save others, and you did it without hesitation. That deserves recognition. After the call ended, Sarah found herself thinking about the young soldier she had seen in the watchtower, the one who had been the first target of the enemy snipers. He was probably not much older than she had been when she first enlisted, full of idealism and determination. Without her intervention, he would have died today, along with many others. The thought brought her back to the fundamental question that had been haunting her since she left the Marines. What was her purpose? For 3 years she had tried to find meaning in civilian life, but today had shown her that her true calling had never really changed. She was a protector, a guardian, someone who stood between the innocent and those who would harm them. Sarah made her decision. She picked up her phone and dialed the number that Colonel Harris had called from. Colonel Harris? This is Sarah Chen. I've been thinking about your offer. The phone call with Colonel Harris had given Sarah much to consider, but it was the conversation with David Kim that truly crystallized her thinking. As she sat in her apartment that night, surrounded by the medals and memories of her past, she began to understand that her 3 years as a cargo pilot hadn't been an escape from her identity. They had been preparation for this moment. I'm listening, Colonel Harris said, his voice carefully neutral. I want to know more about the instructor position. What would my responsibilities be, and what kind of support would I have? The Scout Sniper School is located at Quantico, Virginia. You'd be responsible for training advanced marksmanship, fieldcraft, and tactical employment of precision fire. Your students would be Marines who have already completed basic sniper training and are being prepared for deployment. Sarah walked to her window, phone pressed to her ear. What about the psychological support you mentioned? The changes since Kandahar. We've implemented comprehensive mental health programs for all our snipers. Regular counseling, peer support groups, and mandatory psychological evaluations. We've learned that the mental toll of precision warfare is just as important as the physical training. And if I have problems, if the memories come back, then we deal with them, together. Sarah, the Marine Corps failed you after Kandahar. We should have provided better support, should have recognized the signs of what you were going through. We're committed to doing better. Sarah was quiet for a moment. I need to ask you something, Colonel. Do you know what really happened in Kandahar? The real story, not the sanitized version in the official reports. I know enough. I know that. You were given an impossible mission with inadequate intelligence. I know that you made the best decisions you could with the information available. And I know that you've been carrying guilt that isn't yours to bear. 12 civilians died because of my actions, a family, children. 12 civilians died because enemy combatants were using them as human shields. You eliminated the immediate threat and saved the lives of your fellow Marines. The fact that you feel guilt about those civilian deaths shows exactly the kind of person you are, someone who values all life, not just American life. Sarah felt tears welling up in her eyes. For 3 years, she had carried the weight of those deaths, had replayed the mission over and over in her mind, wondering if she could have done something different. But the truth was that she had been placed in an impossible situation and had made the only choice available to her. I'll need time to settle my affairs here, she said finally. I have a contract with the cargo company, and I need to find someone to take over my routes. Take all the time you need. We'll hold the position for you. After hanging up, Sarah felt a strange sense of relief. For the first time in 3 years, she felt like she was moving forward instead of running away. The decision to return to the Marines wasn't just about her. It was about all the young snipers who would benefit from her training. All the lives that could be saved by passing on her skills and experience. Her phone buzzed with a text message from David Kim. Saw the News about the base attack. 4 confirmed kills. Impressive work. Are you okay? Sarah typed back, I'm good. Actually, I'm better than good. I'm coming home. Home? Back to the Corps. Instructor position at Quantico. It's time to stop running from who I am. David's response came immediately. About damn time. The Marines need you, and you need them. When do you start? Few weeks. I have some things to wrap up here first. Good for you, Sarah. You're making the right choice. Sarah spent the next hour making phone calls and sending emails. She contacted her supervisor at Allied Transport Solutions and explained that she would be leaving to return to military service. She arranged for her apartment lease to be terminated and began the process of packing her belongings. As she worked, she found herself thinking about the young Marines she would soon be training. They would come to her eager to learn, full of confidence and determination. Some of them would be deployed to combat zones, would face the same challenges and moral complexities that she had faced. Her job would be to prepare them as best she could, to give them the skills and knowledge they would need to survive and succeed. But more than that, she would be able to share the hard-won wisdom that came from 8 years of combat experience. She could teach them about the psychological aspects of precision warfare, about the importance of mental preparation and emotional resilience. She could help them understand that being a sniper was about more than just marksmanship. It was about making life and death decisions under extreme pressure. The next morning, Sarah drove to the Allied Transport Solutions office to submit her resignation in person. Her supervisor, Mike Thompson, was understanding but disappointed. You're one of our best pilots, Sarah. Are you sure about this? The military can be a tough life. It's the life I'm suited for, Mike. I tried to be something else, but today proved that I can't run from who I really am. Well, if you ever change your mind, you'll always have a job here. What you did at that base yesterday, that was something special. Sarah cleaned out her locker and said goodbye to her fellow pilots. Most of them were still processing the revelation that their quiet colleague had been a decorated Marine sniper. Some seemed intimidated, others impressed, but all of them treated her with a new level of respect. As she drove home, Sarah reflected on the strange turn her life had taken. 24 hours ago, she had been just another cargo pilot, anonymous and forgotten. Now she was returning to the career she had tried to leave behind, but with a new purpose and a new understanding of her place in the world. That evening, she received a call from her parents. The news of the base attack had reached them, and they were concerned about her safety. Sarah, we're proud of what you did, her mother said. But we're also worried about you going back to the military. We thought you were done with all of that. I thought I was too, Mom, but I've learned something important. You can't run from who you are. I'm a Marine, and I'm a sniper. That's not something I can just turn off. Her father came on the line. Your mother and I support whatever decision you make. We just want you to be safe and happy. I will be, Dad. For the first time in 3 years, I feel like I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. After the call, Sarah sat in her apartment and looked around at the life she was leaving behind. It had been a good life, a safe life, but it hadn't been her life. Tomorrow, she would begin the journey back to who she really was. The paperwork and logistics of returning to active duty took longer than Sarah had anticipated. But finally, after 2 weeks of preparation and processing, the day arrived. 2 weeks later, Sarah stood at the entrance to Marine Corps Base Quantico, wearing her dress blue uniform for the first time in 3 years. The familiar weight of the fabric, the precise creases, the shine of her ribbons and medals, it all felt like coming home. She had been nervous about putting the uniform back on, worried that it might bring back painful memories, but instead she felt a sense of completeness that she hadn't experienced since leaving the Corps. The Scout Sniper School was located in a cluster of buildings that looked unremarkable from the outside, but housed some of the most advanced training facilities in the military. Sarah was met by Master Gunnery Sergeant Rodriguez, a different Rodriguez from the one she had met at the base, who would be her immediate supervisor. "Staff Sergeant Chen, welcome back to the Corps," he said, extending his hand. "I've heard a lot about you. That business at the base a couple weeks ago, impressive work." "Thank you, Master Guns. I'm looking forward to getting started. Let me show you around the facility, then we'll get you oriented with your first class. You'll be teaching advanced marksmanship and tactical employment to a group of Marines who just completed their basic sniper training." As they walked through the facility, Sarah was impressed by the improvements that had been made since she was a student here 8 years ago. The equipment was more modern, the training aids more sophisticated, and there was a clear emphasis on mental health and psychological preparation that hadn't existed when she went through the program. "We've learned a lot about the psychological aspects of precision warfare," Master Guns Rodriguez explained. "We now spend just as much time on mental preparation as we do on marksmanship. The goal is to produce snipers who are not only technically proficient, but also emotionally resilient." They stopped at a classroom where Sarah would be conducting her first lesson. Through the window, she could see a group of 12 Marines sitting at desks, notebooks open, waiting for their instructor. They looked young, impossibly young, but she could see the determination in their faces, the eagerness to learn. "These Marines have all completed basic sniper training," Rodriguez continued. "They're technically proficient, but they need to understand the tactical employment of precision fire and the psychological challenges they'll face in combat. That's where you come in." Sarah studied the faces of her students. In a few months, they would be deployed to combat zones around the world. Some of them would face the same moral complexities that she had faced, would have to make life and death decisions under extreme pressure. Her job was to prepare them as best she could. "What's the first lesson?" she asked. "Introduction to Advanced Tactical Employment. But Sarah, I want you to start with something more personal. These Marines need to understand what they're getting into, the real psychological cost of being a sniper. They need to hear it from someone who's been there." Sarah nodded. She had been thinking about this moment for weeks, planning what she would say to her first class. She wanted to be honest with them about the challenges they would face, but also inspiring about the importance of their mission. She entered the classroom, and the Marines immediately came to attention. "At ease," she said. "Please take your seats." Sarah walked to the front of the room and looked at each of her students. They were all watching her intently, clearly aware of her reputation and eager to learn from her experience. "My name is Staff Sergeant Chen," she began. "I've been a Marine sniper for 8 years, with 5 combat deployments and over 100 confirmed kills. 2 weeks ago, I was flying cargo planes for a civilian company, trying to forget that I had ever been a sniper. Today, I'm standing here in front of you, ready to teach you everything I know about precision warfare." She paused, letting that sink in. "I want to start by telling you a story. A story about a mission that went wrong, about the weight of the decisions we make, and about why I walked away from the Corps 3 years ago." The room was completely silent. Sarah could see that she had their full attention. "In 2022, I was deployed to Afghanistan, part of a team tasked with eliminating a high-value target who was coordinating attacks on coalition forces. The intelligence indicated that he would be at a specific location at a specific time, and my job was to take him out." Sarah walked to the whiteboard and drew a simple diagram of the building where the mission had taken place. The target was in a residential compound surrounded by civilians. My spotter and I had been in position for 6 hours, waiting for a clean shot. When the target finally appeared, he was using a family as human shields, women and children positioned around him as protection. She turned back to her students. "I had a choice. I could take the shot, knowing that I might hit civilians, or I could let the target escape, knowing that he would continue to coordinate attacks that would kill American soldiers. The room remained silent, but Sarah could see the tension in her students' faces. This was the reality of their chosen profession. The moral complexities that textbooks couldn't fully prepare them for. "I took the shot," she continued. "Clean hit on the target. Mission accomplished." But the bullet overpenetrated and struck a civilian behind him, a 7-year-old girl. She died instantly. Sarah saw several of her students shift uncomfortably in their seats. This wasn't the sanitized version of warfare they had expected to hear about. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept seeing that little girl's face, kept wondering if I had made the right choice. The rational part of my mind knew that I had prevented future attacks, had saved the lives of coalition forces. But the human part of my mind couldn't get past the fact that I had killed an innocent child. She walked back to the front of the room. I spent the next year in therapy, trying to process what had happened. I had 3 more deployments, completed dozens more missions, but I was never the same. Eventually, I decided that I couldn't continue being a sniper. I left the corps and tried to build a normal life. Sarah paused, gathering her thoughts. This was the crucial part of her message, the lesson she wanted her students to learn. But 2 weeks ago, I found myself in a situation where my skills were needed. 4 enemy snipers were attacking the military base, and I was the only person in position to stop them. I could have stayed hidden, could have justified it by saying that I was just a civilian contractor. But I didn't. I picked up my rifle and did what I was trained to do. She looked directly at each of her students. "I'm telling you this story because I want you to understand something fundamental about being a sniper. You will face moral complexities that other soldiers never encounter. You will make decisions that will haunt you for the rest of your life. But you will also save lives, protect the innocent, and serve your country in ways that few people can." Sarah's first day at the Scout Sniper School had gone better than she could have hoped. But as she prepared for her second day, she reflected on the magnitude of the responsibility she had accepted. The young Marines in her classroom weren't just students. They were future warriors who would carry the lessons she taught them into combat zones around the world. Sarah walked to the center of the room, positioning herself where she could see all of her students clearly. The question you need to ask yourself is not whether you're ready to kill. Any soldier might have to do that. The question is whether you're ready to live with the consequences of your actions, whether you're prepared to carry the weight of the decisions you'll make. She could see that her words were having an impact. Some of her students looked thoughtful, others appeared concerned, but all of them were engaged with the lesson in a way that went beyond simple academic interest. Over the next 12 weeks, I'm going to teach you everything I know about being a sniper. We'll cover advanced marksmanship, fieldcraft, camouflage, observation, and tactical employment. But more importantly, I'm going to teach you about the mental aspects of precision warfare, how to make life and death decisions under pressure, how to cope with the psychological toll of combat, and how to maintain your humanity while doing a job that requires you to take lives. Sarah moved to the whiteboard and wrote 3 words: precision, patience, and responsibility. She turned back to her students. These are the 3 pillars of being a Marine sniper. Precision means that every shot counts. You don't get second chances, and mistakes can be fatal. Patience means waiting for the right moment, even if it takes hours or days. And responsibility means understanding that every trigger pull is a moral choice, a decision that will have consequences for the rest of your life. She pointed to the first word. Precision is the easiest to teach. It's about marksmanship fundamentals, ballistics, and equipment. Most of you are already skilled marksmen, and will make you even better. But precision is more than just hitting targets. It's about making sure you're hitting the right target, at the right time, for the right reasons. She moved to the second word. Patience is harder to teach because it goes against human nature. In combat, there's a natural tendency to want to act quickly, to get the mission over with. But as a sniper, You might spend days in position waiting for the perfect shot. You need to learn to be comfortable with discomfort, to find peace in the chaos of combat. Finally, she pointed to the third word. Responsibility is the hardest to teach because it's personal. No one can tell you how to carry the weight of the lives you'll take. But I can teach you how to make sure that every life you take serves a purpose, that every trigger pull is justified by the greater good you're protecting. Sarah walked back to her position at the front of the room. I want each of you to think about why you volunteered for sniper training. Was it the prestige, the challenge, the desire to be part of an elite unit? Those are all valid reasons, but they're not enough. If you're going to succeed as a sniper, you need to understand that your primary mission is not to kill, it's to protect. Every shot you take should be in service of protecting innocent life. She paused, letting her words sink in. I want you to remember the story I told you about Afghanistan. Not because I want to scare you, but because I want you to understand that being a sniper means accepting responsibility for the consequences of your actions. You will make mistakes. You will face situations where there are no good choices. But if you remember that your primary mission is to protect, you'll make the right decisions more often than not. Sarah looked around the room one more time. Over the next 12 weeks, some of you will decide that this isn't the path for you. There's no shame in that. Better to realize it now than in combat. But for those of you who continue, I promise to give you everything I have. I'll teach you the skills you need to survive and succeed, and I'll help you develop the mental resilience to handle the challenges you'll face. She walked to her desk and picked up a stack of handouts. Your first assignment is to write a 2-page essay on why you want to be a sniper. Not the official reasons, not what you think I want to hear, but the real reasons. Be honest with yourselves, because if you can't be honest with yourselves, you won't be able to handle the moral complexities of combat. As she distributed the handouts, Sarah felt a sense of purpose that she hadn't experienced in years. These young Marines were depending on her to prepare them for the challenges they would face, and she was determined not to let them down. One more thing, she said as the class was ending. My door is always open. If you're struggling with something, if you need to talk, if you have questions about anything we've discussed, don't hesitate to come see me. Part of my job is to prepare you for combat, but another part is to help you develop into the kind of Marines who can handle the psychological demands of precision warfare. After the students left, Sarah sat alone in the classroom, thinking about the path that had brought her here. 3 years ago, she had been broken, unable to cope with the guilt of Kandahar. 2 weeks ago, she had been a cargo pilot, trying to forget her past. Today, she was a Marine instructor, ready to pass on her knowledge to the next generation of snipers. The journey hadn't been easy, but she had finally found her place in the world. She was no longer running from who she was embracing it, using her experience to help others, and finding meaning in the sharing of her knowledge. Master Gunnery Sergeant Rodriguez appeared in the doorway. How did it go? Good, Sarah said. They're eager to learn, and they're taking it seriously. That's all I can ask for. And how are you doing? First day back in uniform can be emotional. Sarah stood up and straightened her uniform. I'm good. Master Guns. Actually, I'm better than good. I'm home. As she walked out of the classroom, Sarah felt a sense of peace that she hadn't experienced in years. She had found her purpose again, had reconnected with the mission that had defined her adult life. She was a Marine sniper, and she was exactly where she belonged. The quiet cargo pilot was gone, replaced by someone who was ready to train the next generation of warriors. And somewhere in the distance, she could hear the sound of Marines training, preparing for the challenges that lay ahead. The weeks that followed, Sarah's arrival at Quantico fell into a rhythm that felt both familiar and new. Teaching came naturally to her, perhaps because it combined the precision and discipline of her sniper training with the patience and analytical thinking that had served her well in combat. 6 weeks into the training program, Sarah had developed a deep understanding of each of her students' strengths and weaknesses. Lance Corporal Martinez was technically excellent, but struggled with the patience required for long-duration surveillance. Corporal Johnson had natural fieldcraft abilities, but needed work on his long-range marksmanship. Private First Class Thompson was academically brilliant, but had never been tested under real pressure. That it was Thompson who concerned Sarah the most. During classroom discussions, he could recite ballistics formulas and tactical principles flawlessly. But she sensed an underlying uncertainty about whether he could perform when lives were on the line. She had seen this before. Marines who excelled in training but struggled when faced with the reality of combat. After a particularly challenging lesson on target identification in urban environments, Thompson approached Sarah as the other students. "We're leaving, Staff Sergeant. Can I ask you something?" "Of course, Thompson. What's on your mind?" The young Marine shifted uncomfortably. "The story you told us on the first day about the mission in Afghanistan. How do you know when you're making the right choice? How do you live with the uncertainty?" Sarah studied his face, seeing her own younger self in his troubled expression. "You don't know, Thompson. That's the hardest part of this job. You make the best decision you can with the information available, and then you live with the consequences. But what if you're wrong? What if you make a mistake that costs innocent lives?" Sarah gestured for him to sit down. This was exactly the kind of conversation she had hoped to have with her students, the real discussions about the moral complexities of their chosen profession. "Let me tell you about another mission," she said. "This was in Iraq, 2021. My team was tasked with eliminating a bomb maker who was responsible for IEDs that had killed dozens of coalition soldiers. We had solid intelligence on his location and a clear shot." She paused, remembering the weight of that moment. "But as I was preparing to take the shot, I noticed something the intelligence hadn't mentioned. There was a school nearby, and children were playing in the courtyard. If I missed, if the bullet deflected, those children could be hurt." Thompson leaned forward, clearly invested in the story. "What did you choose?" "I waited. For 6 hours, I waited for a better opportunity. My spotter thought I was being overcautious, but I knew that if I rushed the shot and hurt innocent children, I would never forgive myself. Finally, the target moved to a position where I had a clear shot with no risk to civilians. And you took it." "I did. Clean kill, mission accomplished, no collateral damage." But here's the important part, Thompson. Those 6 hours of waiting were some of the longest of my life. I was second-guessing myself, wondering if I was being too cautious. If my hesitation might allow the target to escape and continue making bombs that would kill more soldiers. Sarah looked directly at her student. "The point is that there are no easy answers. Every situation is different. Every choice has consequences. But if you remember that your primary mission is to protect innocent life, both American and civilian, you'll make the right decision more often than not." Thompson nodded slowly. "How do you deal with the pressure? Knowing that people's lives depend on your decisions? You train until your skills become instinctive. You study until you understand every aspect of your mission. And then you trust yourself to make the right choice. But most importantly, you remember that you're not alone. You have your spotter, your team, your chain of command. Use them. Don't try to carry the weight of every decision by yourself." After Thompson left, Sarah reflected on how much she had changed since returning to Quantico. Teaching these young Marines had given her a new perspective on her own experiences. By helping them understand the psychological challenges of precision warfare, she was also helping herself process the trauma of her own combat experiences. Her phone buzzed with a text message from David Kim. "How's the teaching going? Are you making little Marines in your own image?" Sarah smiled and typed back, "They're good kids. Eager to learn, taking it seriously. I think I'm actually helping them. And helping yourself? Sarah paused before responding. Yeah, actually, I think I am. That evening, Sarah was reviewing lesson plans in her office when Master Gunnery Sergeant Rodriguez knocked on her door. Staff Sergeant, do you have a minute? There's something I need to discuss with you. Sarah gestured for him to come in. Rodriguez's expression was serious, which immediately put her on alert. What's the situation, Master Guns? We've received a request from Special Operations Command. They're planning a high-value target elimination mission, and they specifically asked for you. Sarah felt her stomach drop. I'm an instructor now, Master Guns. I'm not operational. I know, and I told them that. But apparently, word has gotten out about what happened at that base 6 weeks ago. They know you're still capable of operational work, and this mission requires someone with your specific skill set. Sarah stood up and walked to her window, looking out at the training grounds where her students were conducting night exercises. What kind of mission? I can't give you details unless you agree to hear the briefing. But I can tell you that it's voluntary, and it would only be a temporary assignment. You'd be back here in 2 weeks, assuming everything goes according to plan. Sarah thought about her students, about the progress they had made over the past 6 weeks. They were beginning to understand the mental aspects of precision warfare, were developing the psychological resilience they would need in combat. Leaving them now, even temporarily, felt like abandoning her responsibility, but she also thought about the young Marines who might be saved if she accepted this mission, about the enemy targets who might continue to operate if she refused. Can I have some time to think about it? Of course. But I need an answer by tomorrow morning. If you decline, they'll have to find someone else, and that will delay the mission. After Rodriguez left, Sarah sat alone in her office, weighing her options. She had found peace in teaching, had discovered a new sense of purpose in preparing the next generation of snipers. But she was still a Marine, still bound by the oath she had taken 8 years ago. Her computer chimed with an email from one of her students, Lance Corporal Martinez, asking for clarification on a ballistics calculation. As she typed her response, Sarah realized that her students had become more than just Marines she was training. They had become her responsibility, her mission, but she also knew that sometimes accepting one mission meant abandoning another. The question was which choice would serve the greater good. Sarah's contemplative walk around the base that night had been interrupted several times by memories of her conversation with Thompson and the weight of responsibility she felt toward all her students. The decision that awaited her in the morning would test everything she had learned about balancing personal duty with service to the Corps. Sarah spent most of the night walking around the base, thinking about the decision she had to make. The familiar weight of the choice reminded her of the burden she had carried as an operational sniper, the constant tension between personal desire and duty, between safety and service. At 0500, she found herself at the rifle range where her students practiced their marksmanship. The target stood silent in the pre-dawn darkness, waiting for another day of training. In a few hours, her Marines would be here, working to perfect their skills, depending on her guidance to prepare them for the challenges they would face. She thought about Thompson and his questions about moral complexity. How could she teach him about making difficult choices if she wasn't willing to make them herself? How could she prepare him for the reality of operational service if she hid behind her instructor position when the Corps needed her skills? At 0600, Sarah knocked on Master Gunnery Sergeant Rodriguez's office door. I'll take the briefing, she said simply. Rodriguez nodded and led her to a secure conference room where a Navy commander and an Air Force major were waiting with classified folders. Staff Sergeant Chen, the Navy commander said. I'm Commander Williams, Special Operations Command. Thank you for agreeing to hear us out. The briefing was comprehensive and sobering. The target was a high-level terrorist coordinator operating in a mountainous region of Syria. He was responsible for planning attacks that had killed dozens of coalition personnel, and intelligence indicated that he was preparing a major operation against American interests. The challenge, Commander Williams explained, is the location. The target is holed up in a compound that's virtually inaccessible to conventional forces. The only approach is through a mountain pass that's heavily defended. The Air Force major opened a satellite photograph showing the target area. The shot would have to be taken from here, he said, pointing to a ridge approximately 2,800 meters from the target compound. It's the only position that offers both line of sight and concealment. Sarah studied the photograph carefully. The distance was extreme, even by her standards. The environmental conditions would be challenging: high altitude, variable winds, and the possibility of changing weather. It was exactly the kind of shot that had made her reputation in the Corps. "What's the timeline?" she asked. 48 hours to get into position, then a 12-hour window to take the shot. Intelligence suggests the target will be vulnerable during a meeting with subordinates. And extraction? Helicopter pickup from a landing zone 2 kilometers from the shooting position. The entire operation should take less than a week. Sarah looked at the faces around the table. These were serious professionals who understood the risks and the importance of the mission. They wouldn't have asked for her specifically unless they believed she was the only one who could make the shot. "I need to make arrangements for my students," she said finally. "And I want to brief my replacement personally." Commander Williams smiled. "Does that mean you're accepting the mission?" "It means I'm accepting the mission." "When do we leave?" "Tomorrow morning." "And Staff Sergeant, thank you. This mission could save a lot of lives." Sarah spent the rest of the day preparing her students for her temporary absence. She arranged for another instructor to take over her classes and provided detailed notes on each student's progress and areas for improvement. Her conversation with Thompson was the most difficult. "Where are you going, Staff Sergeant?" he asked. "I can't give you details, but I'll be back in 2 weeks. Staff Sergeant Harris will be taking over your training while I'm gone." Thompson studied her face carefully. "This is an operational mission, isn't it? You're going back to being a sniper." Sarah was surprised by his perceptiveness. "What makes you say that?" "The way you've been acting today. You're focused, intense, like you're preparing for something important. And you keep checking your equipment bag." Sarah realized that she had been unconsciously preparing for the mission, her body and mind automatically shifting into the mental state she needed for operational work. "Thompson, I want you to remember something while I'm gone. Being a sniper means being ready to serve when the Corps needs you, regardless of your current assignment. I'm a teacher now, but I'm still a Marine. Sometimes those two roles come into conflict. Are you scared?" The question caught Sarah off guard. Scared of what? Of going back to operational work, of having to kill again. Sarah thought about her answer carefully. "I'm not scared of the mission itself. I'm trained for this, and I'm good at it. But I am concerned about leaving you and the other students. I worry that I'm abandoning my responsibility here to chase something from my past." "But you're not abandoning us," Thompson said. "You're showing us what it means to be a Marine. You're demonstrating that service comes first, even when it's difficult." That evening, Sarah packed her gear with the same methodical precision she had used 8 years earlier. Her rifle, broken down and secured in its case. Her ghillie suit, carefully maintained despite 3 years of storage. Her rangefinder, ballistics calculator, and all the tools of her trade dot as she worked. She thought about the conversation with Thompson. He was right. She was demonstrating something important to her students. She was showing them that being a Marine sniper meant being ready to answer the call, regardless of personal comfort or safety. Her phone rang. It was Colonel Martinez from the base where she had made her dramatic return to operational status 6 weeks earlier. "Sarah, I heard you're going back to operational work. I wanted to call and wish you luck." "Thank you, Colonel." It's just a temporary assignment. Maybe, but I want you to know that what you did here changed things. Not just for the base, but for everyone who heard about it. You reminded us all what it means to be ready when duty calls." After the call, Sarah finished her packing and tried to get some sleep. Tomorrow, she would be back in the field, back to the life she had tried to leave behind. But this time was different. This time, she wasn't running from her past. She was embracing her role as both a teacher and a warrior. The quiet cargo pilot was long gone, replaced by someone who understood that true service sometimes meant accepting the missions that others couldn't handle. The transition from instructor to operational sniper happened faster than Sarah had expected. But as she found herself on a military transport heading toward the mission area, she felt the familiar calm that came with returning to what she did best. The insertion went smoothly. Sarah and her two-man support team were dropped by helicopter at a remote landing zone in the Syrian mountains, then moved on foot to their observation position. The climb to the shooting position took 8 hours, navigating treacherous terrain in complete darkness. By dawn, Sarah was in position on the ridge overlooking the target compound. The distance was exactly as briefed, minus 2,847 meters, according to her rangefinder. The environmental conditions were challenging but manageable. Wind speed was variable, between 8 and 12 miles per hour, and the temperature differential between her position and the target would affect bullet trajectory. Her high-powered spotting scope, she could see the compound clearly. It was a fortified structure built into the mountainside, with multiple buildings and clear defensive positions. The target would be vulnerable for only a brief window during his scheduled meeting. Her spotter, Sergeant First Class Wilson, was a professional she had worked with before. He had been part of the team that had requested her specifically for this mission. "Range confirmed at 2,847 meters, Wilson said quietly. "Wind is variable but consistent direction. You've got about 6 hours until the meeting." Sarah settled into position, adjusting her ghillie suit to blend perfectly with the rocky terrain. This was the part of sniping that civilians never understood, the waiting. Hours of absolute stillness, maintaining focus and readiness for the brief moment when action would be required. As the morning progressed, Sarah found her mind wandering to her students back at Quantico. They would be in their advanced fieldcraft class now, learning the patience and discipline that she was demonstrating at this very moment. She thought about Thompson and his questions about moral complexity, about Martinez and his struggle with patience, about all of them preparing for the challenges they would face in their own operational careers. "Movement in the compound," Wilson reported. "Multiple vehicles arriving. This could be it." Sarah shifted her focus back to the mission, watching through her scope as a convoy of vehicles approached the compound. Intelligence had indicated that the target would arrive by vehicle for his meeting, and the timing matched their predictions. "I count 6 vehicles, approximately 20 personnel," Wilson continued, waiting for positive identification of the target. Sarah adjusted her scope, scanning the faces of the men exiting the vehicles. She had memorized the target's photograph, studied his facial features and mannerisms. Among the group of men moving toward the compound's main building, she spotted him. "Target identified," she whispered, moving toward the building entrance. This was the moment she had been training for, the culmination of 8 years of experience and 6 weeks of renewed purpose. But as she settled into her final firing position, Sarah realized that something had changed. The old anxiety, the moral uncertainty that had plagued her since Kandahar, was gone. In its place was a calm certainty that this was exactly what she was supposed to be doing. Range 2,847 meters, wind 10 miles per hour from the west, temperature 78 degrees, Wilson reported. "You have a clear shot." Sarah's breathing slowed to the familiar rhythm. Her finger found the trigger, and she began the slow, steady pressure. That would send a .338 caliber round across nearly 2 miles of mountain air. In the space between heartbeats, in the moment of perfect stillness, she became once again the weapon she had been trained to be. The shot broke clean, and through her scope, Sarah tracked the bullet's path across the valley. At this distance, the time of flight was over 3 seconds, an eternity in which the target could move, the wind could shift, or 100 other variables could affect the outcome. The bullet found its mark with devastating precision. The target dropped instantly, and chaos erupted in the compound as his bodyguards scrambled for cover. The mission was complete. "Confirmed kill," Wilson reported into his radio. "Package delivered. Requesting immediate extraction." As they began their movement to the extraction point, Sarah felt a profound sense of completion. This wasn't just about eliminating a terrorist threat. It was about proving to herself that she could still perform at the highest level, that the skills and instincts that had defined her career were still sharp and reliable. The helicopter extraction was flawless, and within hours, Sarah was back at a forward operating base, filing her after-action report. The mission had been a complete success. The target eliminated, no collateral damage, no friendly casualties. But as she sat in the debriefing room, Sarah's thoughts were already turning to her students back at Quantico. She had been gone for only a week, but it felt much longer. She was eager to return to her teaching responsibilities, to share what she had learned from this mission with the Marines, who were preparing for their own operational careers. The flight back to the United States gave her time to reflect on how much she had changed since that day at the cargo base 6 weeks earlier. She had rediscovered her purpose, reconnected with her identity as a Marine, and found a new mission in preparing the next generation of snipers. When she walked back into the Scout Sniper School at Quantico, her students were waiting for her. They could see something different in her bearing, a confidence and certainty that hadn't been there before. "Welcome back, Staff Sergeant," Thompson said. "How was your trip?" Sarah smiled. "Educational, very educational. Now let's get back to work. You have a lot to learn, and I have a lot to teach you." As she looked around at her students, Sarah realized that she had finally found the balance she had been seeking. She was still a warrior, still capable of operational excellence when the mission required it. But she was also a teacher, a mentor, someone who could pass on the hard-won wisdom of 8 years of combat experience. The quiet cargo pilot was a memory now, replaced by someone who understood that true service meant being ready for whatever role the Corps needed her to fill. Whether it was teaching in a classroom or taking a shot across 2 miles of mountain terrain, she was exactly where she belonged. For Sarah Chen, the journey from cargo pilot to Marine instructor to operational sniper and back again had taught her the most important lesson of all: you can never really leave who you are behind. The challenge is learning to embrace all aspects of yourself and find a way to serve that honors both your past and your future. In the end, they had called her just a cargo pilot, but she had shown them and herself that she was so much more. She was a Marine, a teacher, a warrior, and a guardian. She was exactly who she was supposed to be. As the sun set over Quantico, Sarah prepared for another day of teaching, another opportunity to shape the next generation of Marine snipers. The mission continued, and she was ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.